Well, thank you very much, Mr. President and Nev, for having me here, and thank you everyone for inviting me. I just want to give you a quick correction, is that I do work at 808 Squadron. I'm not actually in charge of the squadron, but I am there as the operations officer, so I do all the planning and for the aircraft and the crews at the squadron. So what we're going to do today, I'll just give you a brief rundown, as the first slide says, on my background and what I've done briefly throughout my career in the military. I'll then put a video on, and you'll see lots of different pictures, primarily of my time in Afghanistan, but also some of my other flying. I'll then talk to you about various, I guess, important milestones along my career, and then finish with another video at the end. So it'll be pretty informal, just me talking to you like this, but I will ask if we can hold questions to the end. There will be plenty of time to ask them. I just know that if we start asking in the middle, we probably won't get to the end of the presentation. So as I said, I grew up in Sydney in the Hills District. I went to Pennant Hills High School and joined the Navy in 2001. I went to ADFA, the Australian Defence Force Academy in Canberra, where I studied a Bachelor of Science degree. Once I finished there, I went on pilot training and then qualified as a helicopter pilot here at HMAS Albatross in 2006. And then I was selected to go to the UK for 4 years. And that was to Commando Helicopter Force, who fly primarily in support of the Royal Marine Commandos. So I had a great 4 and a bit years over there flying for them, flying the Sea Kings, and deploying to Afghanistan 3 times with them. I then came back to Canberra, so it was a bit of a change of scenery from my action-packed, exciting time in the UK. Came back to Canberra and spent a year studying my Masters in Capability Management. And then I came back here to 808 Squadron, where I currently am, flying the MRH-90, and I'm the Operations Officer. So we'll click on now to a video. Hopefully it's not too... So the sound I'm going to have to adjust. It doesn't look like it's going to come through the system, so I'm just going to put a small speaker in here, but the pictures are more important than the sound, so... So that just hopefully gives you a brief overview of mainly my time in Afghanistan. Hopefully shows you maybe a different side to it than what you thought, with the beautiful green fields, the beautiful blue lake, sunsets are stunning. But also then the real side of it, obviously the flying, and how close most of our flying was to the ground and to the population on the ground. Right, so now I'll go right back to the start where I started my training. Not everything has been as exciting as Afghanistan, let me tell you. So I went to ADFA first up, and that was 3 years studying a Bachelor of Science degree in Canberra, where I made many friends, I would say, across the 3 services, because it's a tri-service academy, and they're people that I still bump into today in my career. Even 15 years later, I still bump into people that I met down there. So after my time at ADFA, you then go on pilot's course. And pilot's course starts off with flying a CT-4, which is a smaller aircraft than this one, and we go to Tamworth for about 6 months on that. We then go across to Pearce in Perth and fly the PC-9, which some of you will have seen. It's the same aircraft that the RAF Roulettes fly, the display team. So it's the same aircraft, you know, you wear a G-suit, you've got an oxygen mask on and all that, and it's a high-performance aerobatic aircraft. So we fly that for about 9 months, and then we come across here to Nowra, where we fly the Squirrel helicopter. You spend probably about 12 months learning to fly the Squirrel helicopter, and then you normally progress onto one of the operational helicopters, so be it the MRH-90, the Sea King back in the day, or the Seahawk. But for me, when I came through in around 2006 and 2007, we had some backlog in our training pipeline, and we couldn't get people through those operational courses here in Australia. And so I was selected as one of 4 pilots to go across to the UK and do a loan posting to the Royal Navy. And over there we flew as part of Commando Helicopter Force, which, as I said, flies in support of the Royal Marine Commandos. So, and Commando Helicopter Force, as we said, their primary role flying for the Royal Marine Commandos involves a whole lot of ship work. So normally the Royal Marines go to wherever they're required on board a ship, and we as the helicopter force normally take them ashore, normally in the hours of darkness in, as you can see there, in multiple aircraft, and you just do wave after wave at night, dropping the troops on the shore or just inland so that they can start their assault or whatever it is they're there to do. So I'm just going to go back now to some of the stuff I've done here in Australia before I go over to my focus, which will be the time in the UK with the Royal Marines. So without a doubt, I've done a lot of military-orientated operational stuff, but then I've also done some other pretty fun stuff. So here in the top left, that's me going for a ride in an FA-18 Hornet, one of the Australian Hornets up out of Williamtown. Like I said, I have met many people along the way who I still keep in contact with, and one of those was this particular pilot. So we took a helicopter up there and took some of their maintainers flying, because they don't often get to fly, so we took them flying. And as a consequence, they also took us flying in their FA-18, which without a doubt is still a highlight. On the top right, I got my civilian licenses because of my military training, and that's me taking mum and dad for their first flight with me in an aircraft out of Canberra. We did a loop out here over Albatross, down the coast, along the snowy mountains, and then back into Canberra. And they both enjoyed it, but they were absolutely sure that I was going to get run over by some Qantas jet on the runway at Canberra, which I assured them wasn't going to happen, but we landed safe and sound, and there was no incident to report. Bottom left here, we, as aviators, get access to the flight lanes in Sydney Harbour. So this was us doing one of our flights up to Sydney Harbour Bridge and then back out through the North Heads. And then in the bottom right, throughout my time, I've been heavily involved in military sport. So that's me playing there for the ACT netball team, the Defence netball team. And then I was also selected into the Combined Services Australian Defence Force team. And we played countries like New Zealand and the UK and a few others. So I can't say it's all been hard work. And then moving on to some of the more fun stuff that I also did when I was in the UK is... So yeah, on the top left is Prince Charles. So he was actually the patron of Commando Helicopter Force, because both himself and his brother flew at Commando Helicopter Force back in the day. So he would attend many of our functions, of which I've got some more photos coming. But he also hosted Commando Helicopter Force during their medals parades whenever people came back from Afghanistan. So that's me receiving my British Afghanistan Campaign Medal at Clarence House in London. On the top right, obviously we have lots of formal functions, which I really enjoy. I do actually like getting out of my military uniform and dressing up like a girl and having a good night. In the bottom right, this was us going for desert training in Kenya. So we spent 2 weeks in Kenya because obviously the Brits don't have the hot weather, the hot, dusty weather. So we went down to Kenya for 2 weeks of training. And I must say, we landed here somewhere in a national park, and I did not stray any further than about that from my helicopter. Because it was, we had flown over animals galore in this park, and when we decided to land and shut down for a little while, I just thought, I'm not going to go too far here. And then in the bottom left is also flying down the Thames. A bit like flying down Sydney Harbour, that's us flying down the Thames. There's 2 aircraft, and we just flew in formation down the Thames at 500 feet and passed all the landmarks, and me as the tourist obviously had my camera out taking lots of photos. And this is currently the MRH-90, as some of you asked what I fly. So I fly the MRH-90 at the moment, and it's our Sea King replacement. So it replaced the Sea King in about 2011. The Sea King was decommissioned, and this has taken over as the Navy Troop Transport Helicopter. And that's actually on board HMAS Canberra, where I was last year. So now I'll continue on to probably some of the royal connections that I've had in the UK, and then I'll talk a little bit about my Afghanistan time. So as I said, Prince Charles was the patron of Commando Helicopter Force. So he came to one of our formal functions of an evening. Annually we have dinners. It's a bit like the Fleet Air Arm here. It has an annual dinner where all the aviators go to. Commando Helicopter Force does the same. So everyone comes from all around the country for a bit of a reunion, and he was there as our guest of honour. Just another photo chatting there. And then this was, as I said, the medals parade at Clarence House. We started by actually parading down the Mall. They literally shut the whole thing off for us, and tourists were taking photos of us, and pretty much the whole thing just stopped for us to parade straight down the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace and turn into Clarence House. So that was pretty special. And then again, that was actually Prince Charles awarding me the medal. During my time in the UK, I was also selected to be the officer in charge of the Navy escort vessel that escorted the Queen's barge during the Diamond Jubilee. So down in the bottom left, as you look at the picture, that was the Australian escort vessel, and there was myself and 4 other Australian Navy personnel in there. They also had a Canadian vessel, a British vessel, and I think a New Zealand vessel. So that was, again, I was over there, I got selected to do it, and a moment that I guess I'll never forget. So. And apologies for the picture, that's actually out of a magazine, because obviously I wasn't allowed to take pictures during that event. I would have tried if I could, but I didn't. And then this is us when we got off at HMS President, just under Tower Bridge, where the Queen and all the royal party disembarked. So then we were allowed to take some photos once they had disembarked. As part of the Australian contingent over in England on exchange, we also get access to some of the royal events. One being the garden party, one being Trooping of the Colour, another one is Royal Ascot, and I did take photos at all of them, but I've only got a couple here from the garden party. So you end up going in and there's probably maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people in there, and they're all people that the royal family have invited to thank them normally for their service to the country. So from all walks of life are in there, and everyone's obviously dressed right up and thrilled to be there. We had a lovely day, and then that was out the back of the of Buckingham Palace. But the Queen and the royal party came out and just socialised, and you were made to stand on either side of the area she was walking, but she went up and chatted to people, you know, and spent probably an hour or 2 just meeting and greeting people in the afternoon. All right. So probably, as I said, Commando Helicopter Force has been the focus of my operational experience to date. And that is the Sea that we flew over there, very similar to the Australian Sea. It could seat up to about 22 troops inside, and that is us on one of my Afghanistan tours there. I'm not sure you're actually going to be able to see me. I am in there. That's me just there, standing on the wheel in the lighted uniform. And that's all our maintenance contingent there with us for the photo, as well as the other pilots and air crewmen. So as I said, I was out there as part of the British campaign. I was still representing Australia, so I still wore Australian uniforms and had to abide by the Australian rules of engagement, but I flew the British aircraft and I went on the British operation, which was Operation Herrick. It was located in Helmand Province. I've got a map coming up in a moment. So located in Helmand Province, so I wasn't in Uruzgan where the Australians were, I was completely separate, surrounded by the British. And we were located at Camp Bastion in Helmand Province. On average, we did about 12 to 14 weeks at a time. So we'd go out and then be posted back to the UK for about 6 months, and then you'd go again. So every 6 months, you'd go out for about 3.5 months to Afghanistan and come back. It seems like a fairly quick cycle, but it was really handy in terms of every time you went out, you were quite familiar with the area, so they didn't have to spend a whole lot of time and resources getting you used to the area of operations again and briefing you. It almost became like your second home. You set up and you were ready to go within a couple of days of getting out there. So as I said, I was in Helmand Province, which is the province there in green, and the Australian province was Uruzgan, which is up there in yellow. So I was on Operation Herrick. On average, or as a maximum, we could fly 8 hours a day. So to actually be airborne for 8 hours a day, you could be sitting in the aircraft for more like 12 hours, because every time you landed on the ground, the clock stopped. And let me tell you, 12 hours strapped to a seat that is been designed in the 1950s is not at all good for your back or your behind or anything. So it was a long day, 12 hours, but again, that's what we were there for, and you really just didn't notice it after a while. So we flew day and night, all weathers and all temperatures. So the maximum, I've got a photo I think in probably the next video, but the maximum temperature I've seen in the cockpit is about 48 degrees, and the minimums during winter at night time were more like about -10. So a very big range of temperatures throughout my tours, because I did 2 winter tours and 1 summer tour. The roles that we were employed in out there, we were primarily there for troop transport. So we would move troops between the main bases and the smaller patrol bases, or between the small patrol bases And also we did resupply, so we would take stores to them, and believe it or not, some of the most urgent resupplies we had were actually things like paper cups and toilet paper, because I guess you don't think about these things, but when they get water delivered in big 100-gallon drums or whatever they are, but they actually then can't drink anything out of it without cups. So I did have some very funny requests come across, but I just said yes, and we will do it. We won't ask any questions, but it just showed us the importance of that logistics chain and all the small steps along the way, and how it can have that flow-on effect out there in the field. So we also did underslung loads. That's where we have a big hook that's connected to the bottom of the aircraft, and you hook up a big load either in a big cargo net or something that has been prepared for you to go. And so it dangles below the aircraft by probably about 5 meters. We would take loads up between sort of 1,000 and 2,000 pounds, but it did have a big effect on the aircraft and how manoeuvrable the aircraft was. So again, it was one of those considerations for us. Did we want to do any of that stuff during the day? Because it makes you a really big target, because you're quite slow and you're not very manoeuvrable. And then finally, ops. So we did several deliberate operations where we would do big briefs before we flew. So one of the operations I did, it was a midnight departure, and we had 2 of our Sea Kings. We had 2 of the Chinooks, which are the big double-bladed aircraft, and we had 2 Merlins, which are another lot of troop transports. And then we also had Apache Escorts, which is that armed aircraft in the background of this photo. So we all took off at midnight so there's no communications, no radio calls. Everyone just rolled out onto the runway as per the brief, as was planned, and then took off up to a certain height, went to a certain area. At a certain time, we all descended and all, ran in at 100 feet and dropped troops in various areas so that they could, not swarm's not the right area, but so that they could clear from one side to the other. And they were trying to capture some of the enemy whilst they were involved in whatever they were doing at the time. So it was definitely one of the highlights, and very different to your standard troop movement, which is all very planned and not quite as risky. So. And then I'll just finish off with some impressions. As I touched on, you probably saw in the photos some of the more beautiful scenery photos of Afghanistan. And I guess you've got your standard impression of Afghanistan, which is all the shooting and the dust and everything like that. But then for me, I think it was the harsh beauty of Afghan. That was something that I took away from my time over there, because when the poppy season was out, they would be beautiful, beautiful bright green fields with white and red flowers. And it was really picturesque. I don't think that's what most people think of when they get the image of Afghanistan. And likewise, Kajaki Dam, that was in the north, is a really vibrant blue in total contrast to the dark brown of the mountain range and the surrounds. So again, they were just like little moments that I had probably whilst I was out there that I saw and I really took away from my time there. So just a little bit of a brief. So for our day, when we would fly in Afghanistan, we would always start with a pre-flight briefing, which always happened maybe an hour before we flew. The brief, as you can see, there's a big table there, and it was a full map of Helmand Province, and we would brief every single landing and takeoff that we had throughout the day. So if we were flying for maybe 8 hours, there could be up to 30 or 40 landings that we were going to do, and we stood there with our crew that we were about to fly with our escorts, be they Apache, gunship pilots, or whoever was going to escort us, and we would say, I'm going to go in from here, I'm going to come around here. And the intelligence people would brief us as well and say, stay away from here, or this was where the last enemy action was. And so as you can see, even before you've flown, you've actually spent a fair bit of time and effort, I guess, into preparing for that flight. From the briefing, you'd then walk out, you get all your kit, so your weapons, your armoured vest, and you go out to the aircraft, walk around and start flying. So then, like we said, if you had maybe 8 or 12 hours of flying, you're up to probably about a 15-hour day at this point. But then when you finished, you always came back in and debriefed again. That was really important to work out what went well and what didn't, and also to get feedback on how you could do it better the next time, or provide feedback to anyone who's tasking you, or the intelligence agencies, to let them know what was really happening out there. And as ever, the aircraft captain always had to do paperwork at the end to put the hours in and what was serviceable on the aircraft or not. And so your days were pretty long out there. I'm probably not going to talk too much about this. These are just different moments, I guess, where the leadership aspect of the military came through. So one moment was, and they were probably most of the poignant moments of, I guess, where we were targeted by enemy. So one of them was being told we were going to be targeted going into our next landing zone and making that decision to go or no go. And that was one mission where I was the aircraft and the formation commander, and our other aircraft had gone in first and come out, and then we were about to go in, and the overhead electronic warning aircraft picked up some enemy chatter on their radios, and they said, we're going to target the next aircraft that comes in. And so then they fed that back to me as the aircraft captain, and I had to weigh up the decision between what the intelligence brief was before flying, what the other aircraft encountered when it went in, what they said, and in the end I made the decision that we were still going to go into that landing site, knowing full well that I guess that's what I've been trained for, and that's the decision I have to make, and I'm responsible for that decision. So that was probably one of the most important moments out there for me. Also, the next one, similar in that we were actually already on the ground, and we had an Apache overhead because it was quite a dangerous landing site, and he got on the radio to us and asked us, are we taking fire? And so obviously I was a bit like, well, I don't know anything about this. So we're on the ground, troops are getting out. Naturally, you're up the front of the pilots looking out and getting ready to go, but he asked us that question, are you taking rounds down there? And I was like, no, not that I can see. And he said, well, I think you're taking rounds down there. We can see, I think he was talking about the puffs of dirt as the rounds were going into the dirt. So again, and that decision there was we were not going to take off whilst we had incoming rounds because we only had half the troops off the aircraft. So as a general rule, if you've got any troops off the aircraft, they've either all got to get off or all got to get on, because you can't leave the troops in a vulnerable position. They either need all their men with them to have a good chance of being able to fight, or they all need to come with you and you take them back. So we were halfway through dropping troops off, so we just continued with the drop-off, and obviously the heart rate was going through the roof, and we were tasking everyone in the aircraft different things. You get ready for this, you get ready for that. We're about to go. Crewmen in the back, give us a countdown. How many people are off? Where are they? Because we're going to lift, as soon as we can. But happily, we lifted and got out the way the Apache directed us out away from the firing point. So in both of those incidences, it didn't come to anything serious in the end, which was made me very happy as the aircraft captain. But obviously, it's a lasting memory for me. And we've talked about the briefing and just your daily pressures. And I think the daily pressures, whilst you're not always being shot at, your daily pressures are the change of the program throughout the day, or are you going to have enough fuel? Can you take one more passenger? Because inevitably you go for a pickup, there's always someone who wants to come with you, or something they want to put on board that you haven't programmed. And in terms of fuel and weight and time, it's really critical that you know what's coming beforehand. Otherwise, you then have to make that decision. And again, you don't want to be running out of fuel, or you don't want to be too far from the landing site when you realise you've got a problem. So they were just the daily pressures that we had. And then probably just to sum it up, like I said, I didn't have any incidences, serious ones, but here's one of our aircraft, Adonis 4-1. So our call sign in Afghanistan was Adonis. I'm pretty sure a guy picked that one. So, and this was Adonis 4-1. We always went in pairs. It was Adonis 4-0 and Adonis 4-1. And here's an aircraft. You can see the pilot's window here, and you can actually see the impact just behind it of where the RPG went through the aircraft. So these guys were actually shot down on finals to a landing site. They probably had about 100 feet to go to their landing when the enemy opened up. I think they were about 300 feet away, opened up with an RPG. And luckily it went through behind the pilot. And that's actually there's no people sitting behind that one point. Everywhere else there's troops sitting on both sides of the aircraft, but in that one point is actually a cupboard with all of our control rods and electronics. So in one sense it was good because it missed all the people. In the other sense though, it went through all the control mechanisms for the aircraft. But they landed safely and they got out of the aircraft under fire and then went into one of the local patrol bases whilst the friendly forces returned fire. So in all my time out there, the Commando Helicopter Force did not lose any people, though this aircraft had to be it had to be partly dismantled, or the blades came off, and they got a big Chinook in to lift it out because it couldn't be flown. But anyway, I'll finish with a video now, so hopefully you can take from what I've just been saying a few things when you watch the video. So have a look at the scenery, have a look at the different aircraft that are in the photos, and have a think of any questions you might want to ask me afterwards. So that concludes my presentation there. I just wanted to finish by saying the shooting that you did see out of the aircraft was target practice and nothing more, so don't have to worry about that one. And we have to do that nearly every second or third day to keep our gunners proficient. So yeah, so that concludes the formal part of my presentation, and I'm happy to open the floor up to any questions anyone has from my time here in Australia and the Royal Australian Navy, to my British stuff, to anything from Afghanistan. So
just Kate, your operational hours, how many flying hours have you now got under your belt?
I've got about currently 1,800 hours, and probably 800 of those were in Afghanistan. There's a gentleman down the front here.
I'm on, yes, I'm on. The percentage of females to male personnel, what sort of percentage is it? And just one other quick question. When I was in the army, if my room looked like that, my God, I was in trouble.
So to talk about the room first, so in Afghanistan, you saw that room there. That's actually the best accommodation that they have out there. And because we are air crew, we have to have a certain quality of sleep and a certain number of rest hours versus operational hours. So in general, in terms of the military, the air crew are normally termed as the precious ones because, you know, it's got to be a fairly nice environment for us. And in that room, there was 2 of us, and sometimes there was 3 of us. So it was a bit like being on school camp with lino floorboards, and you literally had maybe 1.5 tables long was the space you had in your half of the room, and probably the width of the table and a bit more wide. So that's why my room was a mess, because there wasn't enough covered space. So that's an easy one. At the moment, the Royal Australian Navy, I think, sits around the 16 to 18% mark for females, and they've got some targets of increasing that to about 25%. I think in maybe the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not 100% sure of those numbers. But in terms of pilots, we've got 5 female pilots out here at the base. So maybe 5 pilots to maybe 150 pilots, I guess. So, and it was the same. So when I was in the when I was in Commando Helicopter Force as part of the Royal Navy, they had no other females there. So I was the only female air crew in terms of pilot or crewman down the back of the aircraft at Commando Helicopter Force for 3 of my years I was there. One British girl came through probably my last year. So, and again, I've asked her, and there's only 2 females there, and this is 5 or 6 years down the track. So I think it's the same for most militaries, that those numbers are very slow to increase.
Kate, periodically we hear about sexism within the services. Have you encountered anything like that? Or as a consequence of that, how are you treated by the predominantly male members of the forces? And a second quick one, the photos with you in them, is that an official photographer who takes those? So it's not an official record of what ops and so on that you've been on, or?
So some of the photos where some of the very high quality ones where I'm in the cockpit and it's the back of my head, we did have one of the Navy photographers come with us, but most of the others are just on my camera that I've taken or that I've given it to one of my crew members to take a photo of me.
Okay, what about the sexism stuff?
So in terms of sexism, I'm only going to be able to comment from my point of view without a doubt. And I have not had an issue from pretty much start to finish. I've not had an issue here in Australia, and even in the UK when I was based with Royal Marine Commandos, who are probably the least politically correct group of individuals you're going to meet. I never had an issue. I think we here do regular training in regards to that awareness of those issues, and I can't really speak for the rest of the Navy in terms of I've only been in the Fleet Air Arm, and the Fleet Air Arm, whether it's well above in its standards and the rest of the Navy, I'm not sure, but the Fleet Air Arm, like I said, I've never had an issue, and everyone's quite aware of anything that's even borderline. So I've not had an issue throughout my time. I can't comment, like I said, for everyone else who's been through and the various issues other people may have had. But yeah, I've not had an issue, like I said, here or overseas.
I hope this doesn't embarrass you, but I took the opportunity to try and get a bit of background on you when I knew you were coming. And one of your senior officers reported to me that you were a particularly good pilot and a good bloke.
Thank you. Is that Tony Rain?
I'm not going to.
Oh, right. And believe it or not, that's actually a compliment in case anyone doesn't realise. Thank you for passing that on. Did you want
Just a quick one, and then I'll give it to I'll be on Sydney Harbour on Australia Day, and the Fleet Air Arm put on a great display always over there on that day. Will you be there that day? And if you are, give us a wave.
There will be an MRH-90 there. It won't be me. I think I might be down here doing some work with the families. But yeah, there should be an MRH-90 at Sydney and maybe Canberra. We're not sure. Just the lady down the front.
Just this last week, I've heard on the news that these armed forces, whichever they are, who are working in Afghanistan, have become very friendly with the people who should be, well, they are on the other side. And I find that very interesting from the point of view that the majority of those would probably be Muslim, and I think that's great, and we should be more of it.
I think in terms of operating in Afghanistan or any of those countries that are quite foreign to us, the only way you're going to succeed in those countries is to try and understand the local population and the local culture, because without that understanding, you can never do what's best for them. And in the end, that's what we're there for, is to do what's best for them and their country. So, yeah.
I've never heard a pilot speak before, so whether you're male or female, but it sounds to me you've got a really hectic pace. So obviously, yes, I mean, you get 5 minutes to yourself somewhere.
So, well, in terms of operations, we would do 2 days of actual tasking, so 2 days of the full-on all day or all night taskings. Then we'd have 1 day where we were the maintenance check pilot crew. So whenever an aircraft needed to go up for a maintenance flight, you'd be the one who did that. And then you would have your 4th day to yourself, normally to do your own admin and not fly. So that was how we did it, like a 4-day rotation when we were out there. To be honest, back here at the squadron at 808, it is very busy. All the pilots fly at least once a day, if not sometimes twice a day. And on top of that, everyone has secondary roles. So someone's either the safety officer who, keeps on top of safety issues, or someone will be the person who's in charge of our navigation computer system, and they keep on top of that. So everyone's got another role. So in terms of, there's probably not a lot of time where you sit around doing nothing. I think our escape is normally going to the gym, because that counts as actually being work for us, but it's a way to get away from the squadron and your desk.
Did you have a weekend off?
Oh yeah. Yes. So in Afghanistan, no, you didn't. You just didn't even know what day of the week it was, because you worked on that 4-day cycle. In general, when you're back here, you should work 5 days a week, but inevitably we get tasked to do weekend stuff because, the fleet is out there. They don't come in on a weekend, so probably every second weekend or so, someone is in. A crew will be in, the maintenance people will be in doing something, or transferring personnel around. It's inevitable that you will work a weekend, probably maybe 1 in 3. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for your attention. Thank you for the presentation. None of us here know what it is like, the job that you're doing. I don't think there's any of us have got an experience of it. And I was intrigued. I took a couple of notes there that I'm going to briefly summarise your life as through my eyes now. And but all in all, it seems to me that it's daily pressures. There's briefings, there's incidents, taking decisions over and over again, taking decisions, and stamina to support it all. Look, it was a wonderful and interesting talk, and I'd like you to express your appreciation. You might put that somewhere in your room.